Today's modern working professionals expect a learning experience that reflects the world we live in. Canvas LMS is built to help organizations unlock the potential of skill-based learning by focusing on what matters to learners and their educators. From dynamic course delivery to adaptable credentialing, Canvas empowers learners to thrive in a rapidly evolving landscape. See what it's all about at canvas.com.
Welcome to the Accidental Trainer, a podcast where you'll hear firsthand stories and tips on how to start and grow your training career.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ATD Accidental Trainer. I'm your host, Alexandria Clapp, and today we have with us Lola Gershfeld. Lola is an organizational psychologist, creator of the EMC process, and a published author. Welcome, Lola.
Thank you, Alexandria. Very nice to be here.
I'm so glad you're joining us today. I'm very excited to talk about our discussion, maybe how to make L&D professionals more effective by building some emotional connection in their organizations. And we will explore that topic soon. But first, let's chat about you and your origin story. How did you land in your current role? Was there anything accidental that happened along the way?
I like that question. Every time something happens, it's because of some accident happens. But as a young professional, I was working as an HR manager, CFO, and a board member, and I saw very interesting dynamics happening in the companies. And it was very fascinating to me. How is it possible that highly intelligent people could not talk to each other? That was really fascinating to me. And why is it possible that people who have high degrees cannot really deal with their employees when they're absent, or managers who don't get along together, or board members who attack each other in meetings? I was completely, fascinated by that. And I remember sitting in 8-hour board meetings with no progress, feeling like we're going in circles over and over again, and feeling so helpless and exhausted. Specifically, like I was thinking in this particular board meeting, I'm looking at the clock, like when is this going to end? I'm wondering, how can we make this better? And where can I get a drink? And I don't even drink. I mean, can you imagine the desperation I felt? And I had no idea what was happening, and, the drama that was consistently being created, and just being stuck in that clueless place. And as a young professional, you go to the bookstore thinking that if you can just find the book, you will find the answer to this. And I read like crazy, but it all talked about building trust and keeping people accountable and creating a conversation, which really didn't tell us how to create that conversation. The interesting thing was, I also felt that people really cared about doing, but they would just get really stuck. And I really felt like it was my goal to find the answer, to find what was going on. And I felt myself very frustrated with the whole situation. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree and psychology degree. But the aha moment, came to me when I was sitting in a couples workshop. And this couples workshop, I highly recommend if anybody wants to do couples relationship work. It's called Hold Me Tight. And it is created by Sue Johnson based on her book, Hold Me Tight. And I'm sitting there in the workshop, and I'm listening to the instructor talk about attachment. And I recall we learned about attachment between children and mothers and parents, John Bowlby, who was the father of attachment. But I never connected that attachment really goes from the cradle to the grave. And we never stop needing others, especially with people we depend on. So the instructor was talking about attachment. She talked about these patterns that couples get stuck in when they get disconnected and when they lose that connection with each other. As I'm listening and watching these interactions, and suddenly I said to myself, oh my God, workplace conflicts are all about these disconnections, these attachment that people lose, and they get stuck in these patterns. So as you can imagine, I was on fire by that time. I started to draw diagrams of the interaction that was happening. I started to understand who triggered whom and how did they get off. And it started to make sense to me more and more of what Sue Johnson talked about with couples, and even John Gottman, if you know his work, talks about in his research. So I flew to New York. I studied with Sue Johnson. And when I came back, I started to apply these skills that I learned with boards and teams. And I couldn't believe the transformation that was happening right in front of my eyes. I tell you, I have goosebumps and I'm talking about it because it was so revealing to me. And so based on the work of Sue Johnson and attachment, John Bowlby, Carl Rogers, Salvador Minuchin, who talked about system theory and how we impact each other when we are in a system, in a family system, in the team system. And I created the training program and outlining the simple step-by-step process on how to repair a relationship, how to regain that connection back, and how to get teams back moving forward together. And I taught at Chapman University, at Pepperdine University, and created that certification program now that we teach at the EMC Leaders, where individuals train, TD professionals, trainers, coaches, leaders, really any team can learn the process, and they don't have to feel stuck. By now, it's been, I think, over 10 years. I've completed over 1,000 training sessions with individuals, teams, organizations. And I cannot tell you, Alexandria, how it feels. First of all, I feel completely confident. I mean, you give me any team, any problem, and I know exactly what to do with them, how to get them back to safety, back to connection, out of distress. And that feels great. It feels empowering. It feels like you have the roadmap. You're no longer, lost in your journey. You feel competent because, health is about feeling competent and worthy. This is what Carl Rogers said. And I really, truly see the transformation that happened for me and for people who learn the process, how much more competent and confident they become. And as a result, they become worthy of themselves, of their own experience, and to know how to fix the problem. That's huge relieving. And I love that.
I love that you mentioned the word empowering. As I listen back to episodes and these conversations, I noticed that that's what I seem to be looking for are these opportunities where our listeners can feel empowered by some idea or framework or tip or strategy or something from our guests and experts. So I'm glad that you've set the tone there right up front, because if you are feeling empowered, I'm sure that folks will feel empowered after listening to this conversation. Let's jump in. I wanted to share some fun stats with you from our community. Our Credentialing Institute did this ATD capabilities model survey, conducted it in the spring, and found that 71 of respondents over the past 2 years have indicated that emotional intelligence and decision-making, those are paired together in our capability model, have become more important in their role. And for our listeners, maybe this will be interesting for you, HR and OD professionals were more likely to report this increase in impact compared to instructional designers. And managers were more likely to report this increase in impact versus individual contributors. But there were a lot of things that had absolutely no statistical significance when looking at this growing importance. So regardless of the industry that you work in, or the size of your organization, small, medium, large, enterprise, whether your organization you consider high performing or average or low performing, whether your workforce is in-person versus remote, years of experience. So none of those had an impact on whether or not folks were weighing in on the importance of emotional intelligence, which I thought was interesting. And lastly, in 2019, we did a survey, and it was ranked as one of the top 5 most important skills in ATD's capability model. So today, in 2024's recent survey, it still ranks in that top 5 list. So I just wanted to share some fun stats from our community and kind of show that this is important. We hear from our community that's important. So I wanted to talk about it on our podcast, but I do think it'd be helpful to level set. Can you help define emotional intelligence for us? And I know you use the term emotional connection, so I'm curious if you sort of group these together, or if you would define them differently. I wanted your advice on this.
Alexandria, as you were sharing the stats about emotional intelligence, it reminded me 20 years ago, I got this book out of my desperation looking for answer on primal leadership by Daniel Goleman. And if you read the book, he talks all about emotional intelligence and the importance of being self-aware and self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And I remember I was reading that book from cover to cover almost several times a week because I was looking for the answer, how to be. I mean, I liked the stories, I liked the outcomes that it produced, but it never really gave me a clue on how do I improve my social awareness other than cognitively understanding that I need to do that. And when I started to use the emotional connection process with myself, with people around me, with colleagues and teams that I was working for, what I suddenly started to notice is that my emotional intelligence started to improve. I became more self-aware. So one of the things that we teach in the EMC process is identifying what is it that you get triggered with. Is it the word, somebody says, the tone of voice? Is it the body language? Is it the actions, or is it facial expression? And when you start to recognize the triggers within yourself, you become more self-aware. And one of the things that I think we don't recognize enough is that people really impact each other at work, because they depend on each other, because they work together. And that impact is bypassed when they talk to each other, when they're trying to understand what's going on. So I created a list of raw spots we like sensitive spots that we all carry and we all have from our past relationships. And as you start to identify, hey, this is my raw spot and here's my raw spot, you start to become more, again, aware of what's happening and how this impacts you in this relationship or in this conversation. The next thing that we teach in the process is to understand, what urge do you have in the moment when you get triggered? What do you want to do in that moment? What some of the automatic thoughts that come up for you? That helps you to self-manage, because the more competent you become on the urge, the more manageable it becomes. So you start to recognize what's happening for you. You start to learn how to slow things down. And I love that about it, because it gave me the control. It gave me the power of emotions. Now, all of the things that we want to learn at how to manage emotions becomes easier to do, because now I'm more self-aware what's happening for me and what I want to do in the moment of disconnection. In the process, we teach how to respond to emotions. We have the 6 responses. We have the 5 techniques. We teach people how to validate and how to emotionally respond to each other, how to normalize, how to reframe things, so people feel more safer and heard and understood. And that helps you to tune into the emotional state of experience that people are sharing. Brené Brown, I love her video, difference between empathy and sympathy. I don't know if you ever watched it, but she talks about the ability to just stay in that emotional experience of the other person, not to provide them any solutions, not to provide them any options or fix their problem. No, it's just holding that space. And so the EMC process, by teaching you how to respond, because people want to respond. They have this urge. Emotions are contagious. So if you're going to tell me about the stress that you're experiencing and I care about you, I'm going to start feeling stressed. So it makes sense that we have this urge to solve the problem, to calm the person down, but sometimes we don't know how to do that. So by learning how to respond to emotions, saying things like, I hear you. That must be so difficult for you. Your feelings are valid. Just that calms the person down. So now you become more social aware. You can tune into that person's emotions. You are listening to the emotional music rather than to the content of the story, where you start to actually arguing, oh, no, you shouldn't think this way because no, that's not how I and you just get off. So, and the last piece, of course, is the relationship management. One of the things that a lot of emotional intelligence programs have is they teach you how to increase all of this by cognitive, by understanding. They do maybe sometimes give you skills, but one of the skills I see missing over again, even in crucial conversations, I see that this piece is missing, is how to repair the relationship, how to repair the disconnections that people experience. How do you repair hurt feelings? How do you talk about the vulnerability? How do you actually provide that, what we call a new corrective emotional experience for people, where they do feel like their hurt impacts you? They do feel that you really get how painful that was for them. And then they can heal that. This is what John Bowlby talked about, is that emotional responsiveness is what builds trust, safety, and connection. Without that emotional responsiveness, you're going to be continually triggering each other, and that raw spot will continue to prevail in your conversations. As you can imagine, when I created the process and I started to use it and I started to see the results, that was so helpful to me. Not only my personal relationships have improved. I mean, you go through the program thinking it's going to help you with your professional relationship, but it helps you in all relationships, and it makes your world, your life, so much more richer. I think in essence, the EMC process, what it does, it's actually a roadmap to becoming emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, definitely. And team collaboration, being able to kind of boost leadership development, having productive working relationships in your organization. These are all evergreen. It doesn't matter what new technology is blowing up everything you ever knew about how you do your work. Like, you're still going to need to work with other people and be able to work through stressful things together. And so it's interesting that this can help facilitate that. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about your ARE model, and the parts that do make sense for being in a working relationship. You're not going to hold their hand, but you have this whole other thought exercise framework and questions and things that you do that you can do without needing to hold someone's hand. Make them feel better.
I completely agree with you. I remember being so frustrated with my board one time. I came to the meeting, and I was the youngest one on the board. I came to a meeting and I was thinking to myself, we need to do something differently so we can get some work done. And I said, well, I have an idea. We have, a full day together. I have an idea. Can we take every hour, can we just take a break and go around the room and give handshakes to each other? And I remember everybody looked at me like I'm this crazy person, thinking to myself, like, what is this, kindergarten or something? But I said, okay, fine. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. After about, I don't know, the first hour, again, we were being stuck in the same argument as we have done it, in the past. And they looked at me and they said, okay, we're going to set the clock. And every hour they stopped the meeting and we went around the room, and some people gave hugs to each other. Some people gave handshake to each other. But that board meeting was the most productive board meeting that we had. And I couldn't understand why. And what was interesting about it is that when I learned about, attachment and these patterns and the emotions it really made sense because by just giving handshakes to each other, you release oxytocin, which reduces the cortisol level, which reduces your stress level. So what we did was by setting a clock every hour to just interrupt the cycle, we prevented us from going further into that negative disconnection. So we kind of gave our brain a break and say, by just going around, we are giving the message that we still care about each other, we are still important to each other, we value each other. And that allowed the amygdala, that hijacks the prefrontal cortex, to be relaxed. And now we know that we don't have to hold hands. But Alan Shore at UCLA talks about the fact that when you create this secure attachment, securely connected relationships, the presence of that person or that team that you have a connected relationship calms you down. And team relationships are attachment relationships because of the dependency people have. I'm dependent on you to be successful in my job, and you dependent on me. Because of that dependency, the brain automatically turns on our bonding needs. And emotional connection is what keeps the bond together. So in attachment relationship, the key question is, are you there for me? And that translates into ARE, translates into, are you accessible to me? Can I reach you? Are you open to me? Do I matter to you in a way that you will allow me to understand your vulnerability? Will you put me first? Or you will be distracted by thousands of things, when I really need you, when I'm coming to you? So are you accessible to me? Are you responsive to me? Will you really recognize my fear or my emotions when I'm under stress? Can I depend on you to be there for me emotionally when I'm falling through space? Are you engaged with me, even though if you don't agree with me, or you're shutting down and just right away and walking away? Maybe you're physically present, but you emotionally is not present. So what we have found is, what research shows is that when the answer to the question, are you there for me? And these are, again, all emotional variables. If the answer to that question is a no or a maybe, then you have insecure attachment. You don't have a security in your relationship. So every time you come to the meeting, every time you have a conversation, your brain is at stress. Your brain is vigilant for that threat to happen because you no longer feel safe. So what we do is, through the emotional connection process, we have what we call bonding conversations. Bonding conversations are conversations where the answer to the question, are you there for me, is answered with a resounding yes. Not just cognitively, yes, I'm there for you. Yes, I'm going to be accessible to you. Yes, you can call me anytime. No, but really answering to the question through that experience of tuning in, being responsive, being accessible, and being emotionally engaged. Attachment is about seeking and maintaining that connection. So when you are experiencing these conversations, everything heals. The relationship heals. You start to have more and more understanding how you trigger each other, how you impact each other, how you can talk about it. You no longer are scared to talk about your hurt feelings. It's okay to talk about hurt feelings. We all get hurt, but the problem is when we don't know how to talk about it, we just basically suppress it. And when we suppress it for a long time, guess what? It explodes. So emotion is really the most powerful thing in the room in a conversation. Emotion is also the most powerful agent of change. If you want to change a relationship, if you want to change a culture, you got to go into the emotion. And then when you have a stronger culture, what happens? You have these nurturing ground where people start to blossom. Emotional connection really grows people. It's not just, being all sentimental about it or feeling like, we need to talk about emotions. Oh my gosh, is this an Oprah Winfrey show? No, it's about understanding that we are bonding mammals. We are homo vinculum. We are the one who bonds. And we need to create the environment where we continue to nurture those bonds. So I feel like TD professionals' role and the job and focus is that. How do we create more secure bonds within our culture, within our teams? Because that's the only way to safety, where the brain can thrive, where the brain can take risks, where the brain can collaborate, is when we have secure bonds.
That was going to be my follow-up question to you. Because if I'm listening, it's one thing to work on that, in the microculture of maybe your L&D team and your peers are working on this, or you with your direct report or vice versa, your manager. But it's another thing to train other people in your organization, as our listeners do, to have these types of bonding conversations. So what does that look like?
It's a great question, because I remember first doing this process on my own and being the person who people would call and say, can you come and fix our team? And can you come and help us to resolve this conflict? And I would do a lot of sessions, and I got very, very, very exhausted. So I created a trainer certification where people can actually learn how to teach this to others. First of all, TD professionals, they need to incorporate that into their training, the concepts of attachment, so people can understand the importance of relationships, the importance of connection, the importance how people impact each other, what happens to them. That's number one. That's very important to people to understand. The second thing, and I think is TD professionals need to give people tools. I remember talking to one particular L&D. She said that we send managers to all kinds of trainings. You take Strength Finder, 7 Habits of Effective People, Speed of Trust, MBTI. You have a slew of training programs that we send the managers to, and they still avoid conflict. They still don't know how to have one-on-one conversations with their employees. What is going on? Why is it not working? Well, because they don't have the right tools, I would say, because they are not addressing the heart of the matter, which is emotional disconnection. That happens. And so managers get stuck in content. I remember receiving this image of a person, she drew a picture of a helicopter flying in the tornado. And she wrote to me this note: dealing with conflicts is like flying a helicopter in a tornado. I mean, who would want to do that? Of course, managers would avoid dealing with people when they feeling stressed themselves. They don't want to create more conflict. They don't want to create more disconnection. So they avoid it. And that creates more disconnection with their employees. What we say is, when you learn the emotional connection process, when you have the right tools, it becomes a regular scheduled flight. It's like any work instruction, any process that you have in your company. It becomes part of your process. Whether you're dealing with some performance review or absenteeism or turnover, you go back to the relationship. You go back to the connection and saying, what is happening with us? Let's do the EMC process, because it's a regular scheduled flight. We know the process works. We know how to get people back to connection. We know what to deal with turbulence. It's predictable. It's repeatable. I mean, it's easy to learn. It takes practice to feel confident in it, because emotion is invisible and you have to feel comfortable with it. That's why we created a reconnection form. Basically tells you, okay, ask this question. What triggered you? The next question, what throw spots? The next question, what are your emotions? So it kind of gives you a roadmap. And as you do it more and more often, it becomes part of you. And I feel like 21st century leadership is about understanding emotions.
When you were sharing your origin story, you mentioned patterns where people get stuck. And I want to jump back to this because you've broken this down for me before, and I know this will be really interesting for our listeners and kind of help make these bonding conversations maybe less abstract. So can you help walk us through those patterns where people get stuck?
Attachment really shows us that when people lose connection, the brain goes into what we call separation distress. The reason why we lose connection is because we get triggered and our raw spots get activated or hit, as I call it, in that moment. So what we do is we take one of two stances or positions in the response to that disconnection. We become either anxious, what we call pursuers, we pursue the connection, or we become avoidant, which means we withdraw. These stances actually seek connection. It's interesting because I was actually very shocked to know that pursuers actively want connection and withdrawers actively preserve the connection. So both people want the connection back, but by the way they're going around getting that connection back actually creates more disconnection. So the first cycle, the first pattern that we see, which is very, very common pattern, is when one pursues, and the pursuers usually go into blame, criticism, maybe judging, lecturing is a very common one. Maybe their tone of voice goes up or the speed of speech goes fast. So they are pursuing the connection. They are falling through space in that moment. So they actively basically saying, I'm scared for losing the connection. Come back to me. Talk to me. The more aggressive they become in their pursuit, the more they scare the withdrawer. But the withdrawers, they get overwhelmed. Even though they want to connect, but because they get overwhelmed, they shut down. This is how they learned to regulate their emotions, by shutting down. They avoid, they get busy, they try not to talk about it. So some of the things that the withdrawers don't recognize is that the more they withdraw, the more the other person becomes anxious. Often I hear withdrawers saying, what did I do? I didn't do anything. The funny thing is, it's not just the pursuers or withdrawers problem. It's they're co-creating this pattern called pursue, withdraw. So that's cycle number one. Pattern number two is when both people are pursuers. So you see actually people actively on the dance floor, actively trying to prove each other wrong. They blame, they judge, they criticize, they lecture each other. Their tone of voice goes up, up, up. And then what happens? They both shut down and withdraw because they're exhausted. And we call them like burned out pursuers. But this is a second pattern, which is very easy to fix because people are on the dance floor and they are right there. They want the connection desperately, but they don't have the right tools. The third pattern is called withdraw. And that is when you have both people are withdrawing. And that's very difficult to fix. That's the hardest one because, first of all, you have to have a lot of safety for people to come back to the dance floor. You have to take it slow. I remember working with this board. Two of the board members did not speak to each other for 5 years. Can you imagine working together on a company strategy and all the things that they have to fix and they have to deal with, and they're not talking to each other, they're not looking at each other. So that's very difficult. And whenever people are stuck in these patterns, what happens to them is they can't really be themselves. They can't really be engaged in their work, and they can't be very productive. They do the minimum because it's very hard to do anything else. So as I worked with that particular board, it took a while, but these people reconnected and repaired the relationship. It helped the whole board to become more cohesive and engaged. And the last pattern is mixed. Sometimes you become pursue, withdraw, sometimes you withdraw. And so you have to understand these patterns will continue to evolve and get bigger throughout the company if you don't address the connection between people. So what happens is now one team is blaming the other team, and then the other team is shutting down this team. So you have a whole group of people now trying to work around these patterns, and they're getting more and more stuck in them. When we work through the process, we teach people is to externalize the problem, right? We say it's the negative cycle's fault. It's not you per se is a bad guy. It's negative cycle is the bad guy. So let us teach you how to dance to a different music, how to change the music So, which is emotion. How do we change emotion? And once we change the emotion, the dance changes. So the people start be more in tune with each other. And they actually, the EMC process consists of 3 stages. The first stage is called the de-escalation stage, where we actually put a cap on that negative cycle, where people start to recognize the steps in the negative cycle and they can actually call it out. And they give names to the cycle. Oh, it sounds like we're getting stuck in this negative cycle. They can see it, they can recognize it. And then they can help each other step out of that negative cycle. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is when they restructure their cycle, basically their pattern. You restructure where you become more ARE, you become more accessible, responsive, and engaged, having these bonding conversations. And stage 3 is when you integrate the emotional connection into your daily conversations, whether it is with your team or with a client, with a patient. I was working with one pharmaceutical company that used the process to help their patients to be more connected with their patients. So it becomes a new being. You start to be in a different way. You start to work in a different way. I think belonging, you start to create more sense of belonging. Belonging leads to becoming, and that's healthy for us.
You answered one of my questions, I think, which was just, does that process of breaking up the disconnection or salvaging or maintaining the connection look different for distributed or global or hybrid teams versus teams that are all in person? But your stages, like the categories, some of these things seem like you could do it whether you're virtually or in person. Is that right?
Alexandria, the virtual, you have to be more in tuned. You have to be more explicit, I would say, in virtual, because when we are in presence of each other, just by being present in the same room, calms our nervous system down. When we are not in the present, I noticed that in a hybrid environment, people become a lot more efficient. They get on Zoom and they say, okay, let's start the meeting. They forget about, how are you doing? I see that you're really stressed. Tell me about it, right? Because we have our faces. It's really hard for us. We get stressed. We have a clock and we say like, oh my gosh, we need to get these done, blah, 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 blah. So as you go through these meetings, what happens? You lose connection. You lose that human touch. You lose the sense of, wait a second, am I just a doer or am I a human being? Do they want me because I just get the things done, or do they want me because they care about me? So I tell people, when you are doing on Zoom or doing virtual, slow things down. Pay attention to the facial expression, to the changes of facial expression. I remember working with one particular professional. He was helping me in my project, and I'm talking to him, and suddenly I see something is happening with him. And I paused. I said, I noticed something is going on. Do you want to share with me? And he turned off his camera right away. And I said, I'm right here. I'm right here. You're not alone. I'm right here. It's going to be okay. And I hear him crying. I was shocked. That, and then he told me that he had a big fight with his girlfriend, and it was very difficult for him to concentrate on work, and he felt like he's failing. All of that came out because I was able to pay attention. So I think in the hybrid environment, we have to be so much more attuned to what's happening. We have to be more deliberate in sending the right message that I care about you. You are important to me. I value you. Your experience matters to me. And that explicit message continues to give that signal to the brain that I matter to this company. I matter to my manager. My manager cares about me. That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to feel. So I think in a hybrid environment, it's harder. It's much harder. Can I share a very quick story? Do we have time?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So there's a leadership team of 10 people on the Zoom. And I say, who would like to share something difficult for them to happen? And this new marketing manager, she said, well, we were getting ready for a trade show and I was working on this poster. And I started to notice that the CEO was very distant and stopped talking to me. And I started to become very sensitive about it. And I'm so scared. I'm worried that there's something happened and we never really talked about it. And I said to her, oh, thank you for sharing. You're so strong to bring that up. Thank you so much. And I went through the process. What was a trigger and what was the raw spots and emotions. And then I said, who in this team do you need reassurance from? Who you would like to have these bonding conversations in? And she said, the CEO. And so I said, okay, everybody turns off their camera except the CEO and the manager. And I said, would you share with him what was happening for you? And what do you need in this moment to feel safe and connected? And she said, okay. So everybody turns off the camera. And she said, I got so scared that I was doing something wrong when I was working on this poster. And I need to know because you pulled away and you stopped talking to me. And what I need to know is that I'm valued, that you care about me. And the CEO, he already had the training, so he didn't get freaked out or anything. And he said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you shared it with me. I was so stressed about the trade show. I didn't know how to respond to the things that were happening. I just want to let you know you are so important to me. I care so much about you. And as he talking, she has tears just flowing down her cheeks. And that bonding conversation, that's where we want. It's you have fireworks. You have a New York skyline is lit up at that moment. And when I said, how was it for you? And my camera is off too. When I came back and I asked everybody to come back to the camera, I said, how was it for you to share? She said, it was amazing. It was so new. I never had this experience before, but it was amazing. And I said to the CEO, how was it for you to respond? And he said, oh my gosh, it's so relieving because I want to be connected to my people. I want them to feel safe to come to me and share those vulnerabilities. When I asked everybody else, what was it like for you to hear that? Every person said it was amazing. So by watching these bonding conversations, even on Zoom, you start to feel a lot more connected as a team, as a whole, as a company. And that makes a huge difference for people.
It's funny you telling that story and just this whole conversation. I was just recently listening to a podcast with Melody Hobson about tough feedback. And first of all, I was thinking, I don't think that I could work with her because I am too emotional and sensitive. And the way that she wants to communicate and get things done doesn't seem like it leaves a lot of room for psychological safety or the way that you deliver feedback or the way that you talk to someone. And this all to say, it started to make me think about if someone is listening right now and they're like, okay, I am not going to get buy-in in my organization for this special bonding conversations. You're feeling skeptical. You're not in my organization. Are there data points, metrics that folks can use to evaluate these bonding questions and strategies and show these work? This is worth it in our organization?
I think as I talk to people over and over again, they come up with the same issues. We need more employee engagement. We have high turnover. We have low productivity. And we recently did a study and we wrote a white paper on it about turnover, intentions, workplace conflict, and emotional intelligence as pertains to these avoidant, anxious behaviors. And what we found was that the more avoidant, anxious behaviors you experience or you have in your company, the more workplace conflict you will have. In fact, 50% of people who leave their jobs, they leave because of workplace conflict. It had a direct correlation between these avoidant, anxious behaviors and turnover intentions and more disengagement. If you want to change those numbers for your company, whether you're working on improving your turnover or you're improving engagement, you really have to think about what would be the best way to address the issues. It's not telling people stop being pursuer or stop being withdrawer. It's going to work only for 5 seconds. You got to get to the heart of the matter, which is emotional disconnection, which is repairing relationships, which is teaching people the tools. And for me, what we have done, like 70 to 73% of people who go through our program say that they have improved significantly. The distress level is lower, the relationship is better. But there's a group of people that they said that it's improved, but not completely out of distress. And so we started to look into what is the difference, why some people go through it and say completely amazing, everything is great, and the other one is not. So we went back and we looked at the process that we did and the teams that we worked with. And what we found was that in the moment when we say, great, thank you for sharing what happened to you. Can you turn now to this person and share them directly? They said yes, but when they turn to them, they can't do it. They can't do it because there's an emotional block. There's some kind of a fear that comes up. And in the moments when we were able to catch it and address it and work on it, they were able to move forward. But the difference is when people stopped the training at that moment and they never experienced those bonding conversations. Those people were never able to move fully forward and heal their relationship so they can feel free and easy together. So if you want to really learn how to make a difference in your relationships, you got to learn how to create these bonding conversations. I'm not saying they're easy, but they are healing, effective, and transformational.
Some folks might argue that emotional intelligence is needed more than ever now with this age of generative AI. What is your opinion on how these two impact or interact with each other?
I love AI. Personally, I love AI. It personally helps me, and the way I use it is to slow myself down. And the reason why I use it is because when you get triggered or when you out of emotional balance, your communication becomes rigid, maybe becomes dry, becomes more transactional, and you start to send a message that there's a loss of care for the person, for the relationship. So what AI does for me personally, however I use it, is when I get triggered and I want to respond right away, I take it through the AI first. And I say, improve this message, because at that moment, when I'm triggered, I'm out of balance, my prefrontal cortex is not activated. I'm not going to have empathy skills. I'm going to have compassion. I'm a very compassionate, empathic person. But when I'm hurt, when I'm on the floor bleeding, I can't do that. I can't be empathic or compassionate. So AI is like my filter. It helps me to translate the message of sending that, a nice, soft message so people can get really clear that I'm still there. I can respond, but at least they're not triggering, or I'm not sending a wrong message as if I don't care about them. So to me, that is very important. Another thing that I've noticed people do is, they keep saying, create an app so I can go through these triggers and raw spots and I can talk to my AI instead of talking to the person. Who are you having a relationship with? The AI or the person? So I think it's hard for people to think if I just go through AI, my relationship would improve. No, you actually have to have these conversations with a person in order to improve them. So I think it just helps. I think AI, great job helping you in these difficult moments so you can move forward.
as we've talked about it before, I think you have a unique perspective where most folks are looking at AI to help them speed up their productivity and their workflow and efficiency, that you have this take where it can actually be of benefit to help you slow down.
Alexandria, when you slow things down, you actually speed up the process, because when you slow things down, you don't get stuck in these negative cycles where now it's going to take all this energy to to create these repair moments for you to clarify the message. So it actually speeds you up, but you're slowed down. Yes.
Right. Slowing down in the short term for the long term of speeding up, because you've eliminated some of these negative cycles. Well, I know we could keep chatting about all sorts of things related to emotional disconnection and how you repair these relationships in your organizations. Hopefully folks got a fun taste of what your background is and how this could work in their own organizations. Let's switch back to you. Do you have any current learning goals?
I think my current learning goal is, how do I simplify it? How do I get my message in a way that people really see the value of and the power of emotions in the workplace? I was never taught to allow myself to talk about emotions in the workplace. It was a taboo topic, and I was taught negotiation skills or communication skills. And when I understood the power of emotions and how we can work with it, it provided me a new color. So I think my objective is to really make it simplified enough for people to say, I want you to know it doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to struggle. You can learn it. It's going to take a little time, but time will still pass. But at the end, you'll be so much more equipped to deal with all kinds of different relationship issues, which you never had before. And attachment really and emotions provide us this guide. So I think that's my learning objective.
Spoken like a true lifelong learner, facilitator, trainer type of objective to me, right? That you're always trying to cut out the nice to know and package it in a good old, this is what you need to know. Here's the first little bit, and then you can add on the rest later. What about where folks can keep up with you and your activity?
Well, they can go to our website, emcleaders.com. They can download my book, The Connected Culture, for free. It's a digital version, or they can buy it hard copy. Amazon Emotional Connection book, the EMC strategy, is a really good intro into the process. They can sign up for the online course, the masterclass. And, one of the things that when we work with companies is we train them. We provide like a 4-hour training, which really gives an overview of the concepts, of the cycles, of the emotional process, and people start to understand the power of it, and then they can learn further. We try to put this information out through YouTube channel, EMC Leaders, through LinkedIn, if you want to follow us, through a podcast that I have, also The Leader in You. And it's my passion. I feel like once I learned this and I figured it out, I feel so responsible now to share it with the world and tell people, HR people, ATD managers, and I love business world. And people say, why don't you bring it to the personal relationship, like children and, teachers? Great, you can do that yourself. I love business because I suffered in business. I feel like I'm responsible. This is my legacy, is I want people to have this process, to know that they are not alone. They can learn it. We can all learn it, and the life becomes better.
Well, thank you so much, Lola, for spending time with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Alexandria. It was so fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you to our sponsor, Canvas by Instructure.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from the Association for Talent Development. Be sure to check the show notes for resources mentioned in today's episode. And if you found the show useful or insightful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.